So we are in business literacy as the ICB presents it. Module 4, written communication. In part 1, I'm going to look at the nature of written communication. So effective written communication is important in the workplace. And there are several reasons for that. Firstly, we have to look at the problem. The world is full of documents. There's many reports. There's a lot to read. There's actually way more to read than what we will ever have time for. And so only a small portion of what is put out there is really read or used. They say that the average businessman wants to read a document in 30 seconds, and if it is longer than that, then it might not be read at all, or it might be read in a way that doesn't give him the full picture. So we suffer from information overload, and we all are confronted with millions of words a month. The business environment is busy. I think we all know that. If you are working, you know that the business environment is a very busy place. There's always more to do than what there is time for. And so it requires speedy communication that is both simple and clear. Because if it is simple and clear, then misunderstandings can be avoided, and we will have a record of the communication that we can keep. Now, with regard to the misunderstandings, the collective memory might not all be on the same page. So if I hear something and you hear something and we have to give feedback as to what it was that we heard, there might be differences. But if it is reduced to paper, then of course it is more believable, because it's the record. You can always just go back to it and see what was written down to see what was really communicated. So good written communication facilitates the understanding. Why do we keep a record? Well, it is permanent and it is professional. It's good if we can always go back. I've had ideas that I've reduced to paper, and then I put it away, and then only a couple of years later do I pick up on it again. I would not be able to do that if I didn't reduce it to writing. So what is written communication? It is the recording of information through written language. Okay, so we're using written language and we are recording it. So meaning is transferred from the writer to the reader, and just like was the case with our verbal communication, written communication is verbal communication as well, but just as was the case with spoken communication, there is a process. So the writer writes a message, makes use of a channel. That channel can be a letter or fax or whatever. It gets to the reader. The reader has to read it, understand the language, and then give feedback to the writer. And there is also noise in the written communication process. So sometimes the words that's used in the written communication can be unfamiliar to us and we really don't understand it, or it is written as jargon or slang, and it's really for a very specific audience, and if I read it, I don't understand it. Or I might go even to the written material with a negative attitude, and I don't like what I read, so I read it in a different manner. There could also be intercultural barriers, and of course there are some people who cannot read. Now, it would be pretty useless to make use of written communication if your audience or the person to who you are trying to communicate is somebody that cannot read. So here a little bit more on the process of written communication. So as I said, you have the sender, and in the case of written communication, the sender is always called a writer, and he puts what he is writing in a code. Now, in this case, I mean, you're looking at a piece of written information that I've given you. The code is the English language, and when after the feedback is received, of course, the sender also has to decode it. So the sender becomes the receiver, and the receiver becomes the sender. All of us are sending written information all the time. All of us are receiving written information all the time. So the sender is busy coding and decoding all the time. In this case, the channel is a very specific written channel. It can be a letter, email, document, a memo, anything like that. The receiver then gets a document and he has to read it. And so from his side, decoding is happening. And once he gets feedback, he will put it in code again. He becomes the sender then. And of course, we have these barriers and noise that can interfere with the written communication process. Unfamiliar language, pompous words, jargon, attitude, and of course literacy level, much like we had a look at on the other slide. So what about the written communication tools? We really only have two written communication tools. The one is reading and the other one is writing. If we are sending, we are writing, and if we are receiving, we are reading. Now, there are three ways in which we can really read, or three major ways in which the first way is we can scan, where we are looking for specifics and not the overall meaning. You can think, if you're looking for a telephone number in a registry, then you will just want to find the person to which it refers, and you are actually not looking at any of the other detail because you're only looking for that one surname, because you only want the telephone number of that one person. When we are doing skim reading, we are reading to get a general idea. So we are reading everything, but we just want to get a specific idea. We are not looking for specifics like we did with scanning. And sometimes it's a good way to do this just before you go to class. Just skim read, so then at least when the lecturer deals with a piece of material in class, it is not completely new to you. And then, of course, there is comprehensive reading, and that is when we read with understanding. When we are writing, that writing can be direct or indirect. If it is direct, it is interpersonal, and we are really expecting a response. Okay, if you send an email, there's normally a question in the email, you're expecting a response. If you are sending somebody a letter, you're expecting a response. But if you publish an article in a newspaper or in a magazine, you are not expecting any response, and in that case your writing will be indirect, as in the assortment of media that we use. Then the principles and things to consider are the same as for oral communication. Once again, you must know who your audience is, you must have a certain purpose in mind, and you will write according to a specific style.